Hello everyone. So this is me going through the Intersect Constitution Council rationale for should K increased. It's the third info action, and the Intersect Council has been trying to follow the same line where we believe the interim constitution allows for the CC to vote on info actions, and not only that, but that info actions are the same as other governance actions in that they require to have a certain standard to them, a minimum standard. And just from like a logical consistency standpoint, it doesn't make sense that we hold some governance action to those standards, not others. So, if you look through my the other videos, you will see some of the more further rationale on that. So let's look at it. So first of all, it's always important to start with the facts. Those are the most subjective thing, and it's important for the people who have trust or confidence in the CC to understand how they're interpreting the facts. So in this case, we think it's an infraction for the technical standards and Article 3, Section 5, and it's a special form of governance action allowed to allow community settlement to be gorged. Yeah, and it doesn't have an on-chain effect or an recording of votes of the action. And then we, after establishing that it's this type of governance action, we then make a comment on the wording that is using K parameter. So currently in the constitution, it's stateful target num. So we also see this as an educational moment, and yeah, really big praise to the people who submitted this, because it's a lot of learning from this infraction for everyone involved. And I certainly hope that if the people involved in this really want to have a key parameter change, that they could resubmit and make sure that they have all of the sufficient material to have a really good polling on that really investigates what the community feels about this. So that's the first point, this educational moment, and clarifying that indeed we interpreted this key parameter to also be the stateful target node. And then we understand it to be about the k and the a0 parameter, and we then interpret the intention segment of the infraction where it says by no means a suggestion what Cardano protocol parameter should be modified to, or if they should be modified this time. The goal of this governance action is to increase governance participation before the next cycle. Certainly a laudable goal. And this is certainly making some limitation on what the intent of the intention was, in terms of not suggesting what K should be modified to. So still suggesting that K should be modified as a question, but not what exactly it should be modified to, or if they should be modified at this time. So also the how much and the when is basically the limitations it's stating. And as we say, the title of the proposal is a question if K should be increased, or actually it says should K increased. So yeah, but this spelling is obviously, and I believe like it's a question if K should be increased. I think no one would argue that objective interpretation. The council interprets this to be that the proposal does not state what specifically it should be changed into, again, as they said in their intention, or if it needs to be modified at this time, again, what they said in their intention, but that, as the title says, the infraction raises the question if K should be increased, and that is the subject of the community poll. And that raises like a more principled question. Should we only go with the intent of the author, or should it be also how this is viewed by the whole community voting on it? And I think it's obvious that everyone has an intent in what they want to communicate, but it's also how it's being actually understood by others that matters. Because if not, you can invent all kinds of intents for things and say something that's completely different. So you have to look objectively at what is written and try to interpret that. And that is what we did. Arguably, there is some level of subjectivity to this. I would say that we can definitely defend that what we're saying here, but I can see other sides of the argument that maybe this limitation does not mean that this title doesn't have any effect. But again, like what are most people voting on? They're voting on this title, should K be increased? And when you then even cannot fully limit it from being a vote about should K be increased, then I think the answer is obvious. it should be treated as such an info action and such a community poll. And then we established that we don't believe the supporting material is sufficient. And because we say that any governance action should be data holders for approval and has standards in terms of sufficient rationale to justify requests to change to the Cardano blockchain. And again, like, is info action that has no direct effect on the chain a request to change the Cardano blockchain? It's not making that enacted at once. It's just an info action poll, and that would again become a technical report. But if you look at if you actually make a protocol parameter suggested change, but if you look at it from like the pure language of it, requested change. So when you are asking this poll, you are actually asking if the community, if you want to have this change. So that's a requested change, and can certainly be interpreted that way. And there's good reasons for that, such as having those minimum standards so we have quality polls. Take, for example, the Ikigai, where we said that you need to have accessible language. So would you be okay with voting on polls that was not accessible? Would it be okay that a small part of the community voted on that when the rest of the community could not access this? And again, for a debate about a K parameter, should you not have some supporting material that is relevant to this discussion? And I mean, if you have been in the Cardano community for a while, you know that this K parameter is something that's been hotly debated, and there's a lot of data on this, on what's believed to be the impact if you either decrease or increase it or make it stable. So it seems only a quality mark for any type of poll to actually include some relevant supporting material on what the author of the poll believes the impact will be of what is being polled. And this is a quality mark for when you're trying to poll something requests changes to the Cardano blockchain. And this is not a stab at Atrium Labs in any way. Like, it's just a purely like looking at the supporting material. It's a link to Atrium Labs. It's a link to a video by Atrium Labs on Cardano Governance, but not specifically to this numpool change. And it's an educational post on cryptocurrency, and again, not specifically directly on the impact of increasing K. That is the question being asked. So the impact in itself does give a short description of K, but it doesn't go into the details of an increase of K. That's thing being called here will affect the Cardano blockchain. And objectively, it does seem more relevant for promoting Atrium Labs because it's a link to Atrium Labs, a link to a general Cardano Governance article, and an education post. And certainly relative to informing voters on a community poll question to a sufficient degree. And that is what we're trying to look at. Sufficient rationale. And the rationale we have is that does the infraction fulfill the requirement in the Constitution? We say that it does for an infraction, certainly, but it only partially fulfills Article 3, Section 6. And you can see our previous two infractions for why we believe Article 3, Section 6 also applies to infractions, because it's for all governance actions, and we give a further rationale there. And because of this, only partial fulfilling Article 3, Section 6 is not constitutional. And we note, like, and this is really important, we in the Intersect Council, and this is the only time I will say not only my personal opinion interpreting, but I mean, this was super clear by everyone, and we voted this unanimously, like 7-0 unconstitutional. Like, this is only about the constitutionality of the standard of the rationale not being sufficient. It's nothing at all against increasing or decreasing K. That is not what we are voting on here. If the community wants to vote yes to increase K, by all means, please make sure the polls have sufficient supporting material so it's a quality space. And yeah, and then we discuss intent of the infraction and standards related to infraction being tools for community sentiments. And this is a long debate on this, and again, we as a community is learning, so We will evolve with the rest of the community on this, but as far as we see in the constitution and our interpretation of it, we not only risk this Article 3, Section 6, we also agree with the Cardano Foundation in their rationale that they highlight Article 1, Section 1, that we need to uphold transparency, openness, and responsible governance. And this lack of relevant support material on the potential, again, potential optional material also does not align with responsible governance. And again, like we would highlight opportunity for community to refine impact as community center engages with off-chain discussion in various tools online. For example, Golf tool allows you, I think you can already pre-discuss before submitting. And if you pay 100,000 ETH and want to really post something that the whole entire Cardano community will vote on, that's a significant thing for the community to do. Like, it's not something to scoff at. That's a lot of man hours in terms of people looking at these things. So please make sure that it's discussed off-chain, sure that it fulfills minimum requirements, and doing this to ensure that on-chain governance is transparent, and where the community sentiment is done at the stage when the community is informed on a topic, thus promoting effectiveness. This does not mean that you have to pre-inform of what you're going to vote, but you need to have made some form of idea about what you're voting on. If it's making an impact on the chain, proposed impact for the future, then you should actually think about what you as a proposer believe the effect of the proposed change or ranges of changes proposed to have. In this case, it's quite unspecific. It's should K be increased? So, okay, if what happens if K is increased and at what various levels? There's plenty of, for example, blog posts about this and Cardano forum room discussions about models where they look at different increases, how that would affect. And then the community has a much better fact base to vote on, and we get better governance. And again, it's a minimum standard. If there was anything here in the supporting material related to the poll, then you should say and that it's sufficient. Again, where does that bar go? It goes, it should be a minimum bar because we as a CC should not be overextending our reach. But as a minimum, polls related to changing protocol parameter should discuss what you as a proposer believe will be the effect of the proposed change or range of changes proposed. That was our statement. So with that said, I want to highlight like more general, like this debate going if you should vote on infraction or not. And the first I would say is like, should the CC vote on every infraction? Probably not. We already established in Longmont that we will be prioritizing actions. This is because we need to be able to scale. If there's so many actions, we need to prioritize what's most important to vote. And that's just how it is. If there's going to be a human element to this voting with the CC, you need to be able to prioritize governance actions. Of course, you should hold the CC accountable to that in terms of what they decide to prioritize. That's the broader view, so keep that in mind when we talk about this. It doesn't mean that the CC should be voting on every single voting action. It doesn't mean that they should be necessarily voting on every single other action. They need to prioritize when there's more than one action to be voted on in a time period. That's just how it is. Then the next one is if you establish that you can vote sometimes, like why is it so important to vote no early? Like because as I discussed in the first like Hoskitoki action, it's really important for the community to understand what's the different constitutional council position on this matter. And you do that by not being silent, but by actually voicing your opinion. That voicing of opinion could be abstain, and you could write why you're abstaining, but if you don't say anything, there's information for it. Yeah, and if you just post it on Twitter, what's your intent, then probably a large segment of the community that doesn't go on Twitter will never see that. There has to be some form of on-chain information being given about where the CC stands on the infection. And the other part of it is purely down to interpretation, and that's currently something each individual council that represents a committee member actually decides themselves. Like, they will write what is their interpretation, and how they came to it. There is some form of, I would say, majority in terms of if you look at how many are voting, that you certainly should or be allowed to vote on infractions, because majority of council members seems to be voting either abstain or yes or no on current infractions. And for me, like the really springing question here is like, on the one hand, we have to make sure that the CC is not like censoring something in functions that are overextending our power. But on the other hand, like we're already doing the exact same thing for other infractions, and we're held accountable for other governance actions, and we're held accountable to the no confidence action. And otherwise, like there's so many reasons to why we want to have quality in, like we want to have polls that where, for example, the supporting material hash, if it has a link to more material, you could change easily that more material link without even changing the hash. So you need to have that quality assurance that the human element can say, look, here the hash is the same, but the link posted to in the document with the supporting material, actually the material from that link was changed, and maybe it's even, as we say in the last segment of section 6, that it's maybe doing undue influence or manipulation. To not have that safeguard actually potentially is a big security risk, in my opinion, to the Cardano blockchain, because you risk having really contagious debates in these community polls that are not informed, that's potentially even manipulative or causing undue influence. Imagine this, like contingent staking times 100, something even much more passionate, and then people selectively changing material or changing what was seen as context that was really important to have, that anyone agreed or didn't provide any context on a very hotly debated topic. Then you have these other types of border where you're breaking like human rights and saying like encouraging like torture or all these like activities that most humans would say is offensive to them. And shouldn't there be like some form of border where the CC should be able to say this is actually unconstitutional, it breaks with all of the other things in our constitution? So as you may understand by my videos, I'm clearly on the line of allowing the vote, but that doesn't mean I want to have a CC that has a large reach on this. It should be objective, it should be what's in the constitution, these standards. These are on making sure we're as objective and describing as well as we can how we interpret the facts and why it's breaking with those constitutionality requirements. That is important to me. Please let me know if you agree or disagree, or if you have other aspects. But that was the rationale, and this was my perspective on this. I will say again, like, that I don't represent the whole council when I talk about this now, and I think this speaks for itself in the internal vote in terms of what the council thinks as well. Yeah, thank you.